Okay, hello everyone. Guess we're gonna get started with our session. So we're like having a meeting in here, and the parents are gonna be meeting in there for just an hour today. So usually the class is 2 hours from 6:30 to 8:30 on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but today it's just an hour because it's our first class. So we'll have like three teachers. It'll be me, Manoj, and then another girl who you'll meet later on in the next couple of weeks. But my name is Lauren Okine, and I just graduated from Dakota Valley like a couple of weeks ago. So I'm excited to be heading to college in the fall. Um, but yeah, that's just about me. And I've been working with Manoj for like almost 2 years, I think. And then I've taught like one ACT class before this, and you guys are like my second full class. Um, Hello. Sorry, I'm just coming over a cold. This is not COVID. But yeah, so you guys online, and then we'll be doing online and then in person. So I'll kind of be like speaking to both of you. But hopefully you guys can both get a lot out of this like entire class. Hopefully you all brought like your materials. I'm going to talk about like everything you need. And so basically, at least when I'm here, what the class will consist of is like some notes, and then we'll do like practice tests, or it'll be like just like maybe an entire day of practice tests. I'm not really sure like how the other instructors do it. Maybe we'll do something different, but that's how I usually do it. And then other than that, yeah, I guess I introduce myself. I guess I'll like talk about like my ACT score. So this is like an ACT class, and I'm not like a quack. I got I got a 34 composite on my score, so hopefully I have some things I can teach you guys. And then like my breakdown, I got a 36 English, and then my math was a 33, science was a 30. Sorry, I don't even remember. Science was a 32, and then my reading was a 36. So I had to write that down, but I took it 2 years ago. And so I'm going to ask you guys, like, have any of you taken the ACT before? You can just, like, raise your hands. All you guys. And then online, if you want to use the, like, raise hand function. I don't know if that works. But if you've taken the ACT before. Okay, so that's kind of like a lot of you, at least I'm seeing. Yeah, okay. So, like, quite a bit of you. Okay, that's pretty good. So you, like, kind of know the breakdown. For some of you who haven't, we'll still, like, be going over, like, the basics and stuff. But we'll get deeper into the ACT, and then we're not going to do class introductions just because like some of you guys are online. But hopefully you can like get to know each other over the next couple of weeks. I'm sure some of you guys like know each other. If you're online, maybe you like recognize some names, I don't know. But yeah, so let's like jump into what's important for this class. Okay, so usually during class, I will like write things on the board, and that'll be like what I want you guys to write down in your notebooks when we're taking notes. Right now, since I'm just talking about like the class, if I do write anything on the board, you don't need to write it down because it's just like what's important to remember for class. Let's see, yeah, okay. So some things are important. Like I just said, usually whatever I write down on the board is what I want you guys to write down in your notes. You don't have to write it down like word for word or exactly, but something close to that so you can like look back on it and remember. And another thing that's really important is actually doing like all of the homework. So I think after today's class, Manoj is going to send out like the homework assignments. And so it'll tell you like for week 1 what you have to do like throughout the week. It's not just in one night. I think it's just like for that week. And so doing the homework is really important because like the ACT is not a content test. It's more like when you show up, you don't know what you're getting tested on. So the best way to prepare for that is to practice. And so like doing the homework and doing these practice tests is like the best way to prepare for the ACT. Sorry. And then also, you guys, I want you to do your homework to learn stuff, not just like going through the motions. When you're doing the homework, like actually pay attention because this is like what's helping you. It's not make it worth your time. Don't like make it a waste of time. And then another thing, come to class prepared. So you're gonna need like your ACT book. We don't do math every day, but on those days, usually like the math book. I think like the workbook, the ACT workbook, ACT 36, those are mostly for like your homework assignments. I don't ever use them like in my class sessions. But usually like either the ACT like prep guide or the 10 ACT like questions, we usually use those a lot when we do take practice tests in class. So make sure you always have those books. A calculator on like the math days, and then like a pencil in your notebook to take notes. And then let's see. Yeah, so I think those are all the materials you'll need. We also have like a break in between the 2 hours, so you can bring like snacks and drinks and stuff. And yeah, so come to class prepared. And then if you have any questions, you can always ask me or the other instructors. If you have any questions with your homework over the week, you can always like come back. I think I'm in the group meet, so if you want to like shoot me a message or whatever, you can. But then you can also ask during class time, and hopefully I can help you out with that. And then please ask questions, because that helps me like know what to focus on or what you guys like need help with more or less. Like if something's really easy and I'm like focusing on it and you guys are like, we don't need to do that, like we know how to do it already, then we can like move on from that. Yeah, and then like asking questions makes class more interesting, because if I'm just standing up here like talking for 2 hours, that's like really boring for me and for you guys. So hopefully you can like ask some questions so we can like have it more of a discussion based class than just like me talking. I don't know. Yeah, so if you have any homework questions, you can ask them during class. You can text Manoj, me, the other instructor. Her name is Alexa. I don't know if you guys have met her. Well, you'll meet her soon. And yeah, again, like there's no like dumb questions or anything like that. And if anything, it's just like helping you prepare for the ACT. Like it's gonna help you in the long run. So I highly encourage it. And then also I need to go over how to do the homework. So I talked about the sheet that Manoj is gonna like send out, and it will say like what your assignment is, which book it's in, everything like that. So follow the sheet that he gives you. I think you can ask him if you have any questions. And then another thing that helps you is like we'll do this a lot in class, but taking practice tests. Like I said, so take them seriously. I recommend timing them. The ACT is a timed test, so we want to practice with it timed. We don't want to like give yourself all the time in the world, and then when it comes to the actual test, you're like taking your time and like time's up and you didn't finish. So just by like taking them timed, it can pressure you. So then like the time the test comes around, you like know how many questions to get done in like how many or so minutes. Yeah, and then the books that we gave you, those are yours to use. Like use them to your advantage. We don't go through like every single page in class, but you can do that on your own if you like want extra help or you're interested in like going above and beyond than from this class. So use those books to your advantage. They're great resources. We didn't pick like bad books or anything like that. They're going to be really similar to the actual ACT test. And then, let's see. Okay, so kind of about doing the homework. Usually it's going to be like something to read, or it'll be like an actual practice test. And so when you're doing that, always correct them. Don't just take the test without knowing if you got them right or wrong. Always correct the practice tests, and then mark the wrong answers, but like not the correct answers, because if you got it correct, you probably knew how to do it. And so then go through the incorrect ones and try them again before looking at the right answer. And so then after you do that, you can like check if it's correct and see like maybe you figured out what you did wrong, or otherwise in the back of all of the books there's an explanation, so it'll tell you like how to do that specific question and like what maybe you might have missed. So the process of like trying again instead of just looking at the right answer can like help build your knowledge. If you have any other like strategies that you like to use, like go for it. I'm not telling you like what's right or wrong. Well, I'll tell you like some tips and tricks, but for just like correcting, you can do whatever you want. That's just like a tip or a strategy. But yeah, okay, so other than that, do you guys have any questions? I know there was a lot, and I was kind of talking fast, but Do you have any questions for me so far? You have a question?
Well, I need my stuff today.
Okay, yeah. So no, you don't need any of your stuff today. Maybe do you have a notebook or a pencil? No. Does everyone else have a notebook or a pencil? Yeah. Do you guys online have a notebook and a pencil? At least some are with you. Yeah. Okay. Great. Let me grab one for you really quick because we will be taking notes later on, but there's still a couple more things to talk about. Okay, so what's your work for today? Okay. Yeah, okay. Other things I want to mention, not really related to the ACT, but if I am talking too fast, like I think I was today, please let me know and like stop me, because like when I am explaining things, if I'm talking too fast and you like didn't understand it, that's going to be a problem. I'm so sorry, but if you need me to explain anything better, like I can totally do that. No problem. Just please let me know because I won't know if like I'm talking super fast and you guys don't understand it if you like don't tell me. Talk about the books. Yeah, so usually I may forget when I'm here, but usually at the beginning of class I'll say like, did you have any questions on the homework or anything? And then you can ask me if you do. If I don't say that or if I do forget, you can just say like, oh, I had a question on the homework. If you don't want to ask like during class, maybe you can like ask before or stick around at the end. And you guys, I'll keep you online for like a few minutes after class if you do have any questions online. But yeah, okay. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else I want to. Hold on, let me check. Okay, so I think that was all the important things I needed to mention. And then Manoj just said, like, stress the importance of homework. It's really important, guys. Like, if you take this class but you never took a full practice test, then you're still going to be unprepared when it comes to, like, the ACT. So it's really important to do the homework, take the practice test, and all that. So now we're going to do, like, a really brief rundown of the actual ACT, like the format. A lot of you guys said you took it before, and we'll also go more in depth like with other classes. So I'm just gonna talk about like the ACT in general. So it's like about a 3-hour test, maybe like 4 hours with breaks and all the registration and stuff you have to do. It starts with the English test, and that's 45 minutes, 75 questions. Some questions you can do maybe in like 2 or 3 seconds, like just quick, just like that. And then the other ones, that gives you time for maybe some that take like 2 or 3 minutes. They're a little more difficult. That gives you more time for those. And then after the English test is the math test, which is 60 minutes and 60 questions. So it breaks down to like a minute per question. Again, there are some questions that you can do in less than a minute and some that take you longer than a minute to solve. After those 2 tests is like the 10 or so minute break. And then you'll have the 35-minute reading test, which is 40 questions. And then after that is the 35-minute science test, which is also 40 questions. If you're done, then you can leave. Otherwise, there's a optional writing portion, which is another 40 minutes. So that's the general ACT test. What we're gonna be, what we're gonna be doing today is covering the reading basics. We're gonna be talking about some strategies and stuff. So I guess we'll just jump right in. So if you guys have your notebooks and your pencils and everything, we're going to start with notes on the reading test. Okay, let's see that. Sometimes my writing like goes slanted, so I'm sorry about that. I've been trying to get better at it, so hopefully it doesn't. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about ACT reading. So this test is, for the breakdown, it's 40 questions. And then I also mentioned this 35 minutes. And then it also has 4 passages. So by passages, that means just like an excerpt of writing that you'll read, and it'll ask questions about like each passage. So with the passages, there's 10 questions per passage. And then what happens is that breaks down to 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. And so what like Manoj always recommends is to try and do each passage in 8 minutes. So we'll put a star. Do in 8. And so by like striving to finish it in 8 minutes, that gives you extra time to like maybe look over your work, make sure you're like you agree with all your answers, make sure you didn't like bubble in something incorrectly, anything like that. That just gives you like that little extra bit of cushion time. Or maybe if you couldn't finish in 8 minutes, or like one passage is really hard, it gives you time to like bubble in answers, something like that. Okay, so I said there were 4 passages, but there are actually 4 different types of passages, so we're going to talk about all of those. So the first passage is prose fiction. And so they always title them, they'll say like, this is a prose fiction passage, this is the blah 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 passage. The first passage is always prose fiction, and so what that means is kind of like, I don't know if you guys know like what prose means, but prose fiction is kind of just like a narration. So what happens is like they'll tell a story, it'll be like characters, they'll like develop, everything like that. So when you read a prose fiction passage, usually what they're asking you to think about is like the theme or the bigger picture. And that's just because it's like a fiction, it's like a narration, kind of like a story. So then the next type of passage is they call it social sciences. And so, that one is more like our history. If you think like a subject in school, maybe like social studies. And so with this passage, I want you to think about the subject, like whose the story is about, and then also like the point of view. That's a V. Like the author or whoever wrote the passage, like what they're trying to get across to the audience. Okay, and then our third passage is humanities. So this one is kind of like the arts. And so with this passage, what I want you to think about is like tone, and then the feeling the author is trying to get from the audience. Okay, and then we've got one more passage, which is the natural science passage. And it's just like what it sounds like, it's like about science. And so with this one, I want you to think about detail. Usually it would be like detail-based questions. You guys have any questions so far? No? Okay. So, does everyone have this down? Can I erase it? Yeah. So we just talked about the types of passages. Now we're going to talk about the different types of questions that they might ask you on the reading test. So there's 5 main types of questions they'll ask you. There's obviously going to be some different, but we'll hit the big ones. So they'll definitely ask a question about the main idea. And so people call this the big picture, I guess. So it's kind of after you read maybe a story or an article, and you're what did they want me to learn? That was kind of the big picture, the main idea. And then they'll also ask questions about specific details. So that's gonna kind of be the little picture. And so luckily with the ACT reading, they don't hand you the passage and then take it away. It's right there next to you. So if they ask a specific detail question, you can go back and look and find the answer and make sure it's correct. So then they'll ask detail questions. They'll also ask, on the reading test, they'll ask about vocabulary, but it's always in context. So they won't just straight out ask you what does this word mean? And you'll have to choose between the different options. They'll say in line 7, paragraph 2, what did they mean by using this word? And so you'll have to choose the best option. So it's always vocabulary in context, because you know how the same word can mean different things. They'll ask you what it meant in that passage. They will ask some inference questions. So that means that the answer is not directly stated in the passage, but something with the ACT is that all of the answers should be supported by the passage. There should be some evidence to lead you to choose the correct answer. So even if you have to infer, there should be evidence or supporting information in the passage to lead you to the correct answer. And then the last type of question we'll touch on is the author's method or their view. So they'll talk about why the author did what they did or why they chose to write that way, anything like that. But just the author's method or view. And also a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, it might kind of be weird if you haven't taken a practice test yet, but we will take one soon. I don't know about, maybe next class, but we will take a practice test soon. So kind of all this stuff we're talking about and the notes, you'll kind of recognize it when we're taking the practice test. So now we're going to talk about passage methods. So this is now we're jumping into the test. These are strategies that you can use when you're taking this reading test. Okay. So I guess there are basically 4 ways you can approach the test. You can, okay, we'll talk about that. But I guess like this class, we recommend only doing like 2 of the methods. Sorry, 2 of the methods, because the other 2 are probably not going to help you. They may end up hurting you. So I guess we'll talk about them. And I'll just write them all up here. Okay, so these are like the 4 ways you can approach it. You can skim the passage and then read the questions and then answer them. You can read the passage and then read the questions and then answer them. You can read the questions and then go back and mark the passage, like where you found the answers, and then answer the questions. Or you can read the questions and then read the passage and then go and answer your questions. Okay, so test time. Who wants to guess which 2 methods we would recommend? Anyone? Yeah, correct. What was your name? Kara. Yeah, Kara.
Yeah.
Yay, we had our first question or answer of the class. So yeah, so I'd recommend these first 2, and then actually these bottom 2, I would cross them off. So we'll talk about these, but the first 2, skimming the passage and then reading the questions, or either reading the passage and then reading the questions, are the best. I know with some tests, like it's easy to like read the questions first and then go back and like look for the answers. But on the ACT reading, if you ever like read the questions first and then go back and look for the answers, because it's like such a long passage, you have to like, it's not super long, but it's, I guess, like deep. You need to like pay attention to it and be looking for like the main idea, the details. By the time you get through it like thoroughly, you'll forget the questions, or at least most of them. And so it's definitely more important to either skim or read the passage before looking at the questions. And so these numbers I wrote here, these are kind of just like breakdowns for your time or the minutes. So if you're gonna skim the passage, you should probably do it in like around 3 minutes, and then have like 5 minutes left to answer the questions. Because remember I said we want to do it in 8 minutes. And then if you're like a person who wants to like get more deeper into the passage, you can try and read it in 4 minutes and then answer the questions in 4 minutes. So like depending on which one you're stronger on, if you feel like you're a better like maybe test taker and not as good of a reader, I would like skim the passage and then answer the questions in like the 3 to 5 minute ratio. If you feel like you're pretty good at reading and maybe you like you don't need as much time to answer the questions, like you understand it, then I do like the 4 minutes for reading and the 4 minutes for the questions. And I guess like everything I say in this class you don't have to do. So if you want to read the questions first and then go back and read the passage, you can totally do that. I'm not saying you can't, but I recommend either these first 2 methods, like skimming or reading the passage first and then going back and answering questions. Okay, so I'm going to talk about another strategy, which is just like, again, like I said, You don't have to do everything I say here. And so this is not a strategy that I personally used. But I'm still going to mention it just in case like you guys find it helpful or anything like that, because I know like my strategies are not the same as everyone else's. But one thing you can do before even like starting to read and answering the questions is to like flip to the passage that you find the most easiest. So you guys should have written these down, but we talked about the types of passages like the prose, fiction, social sciences, humanities, natural science. So it's always going to come in that order. So if you're like really good at science stuff and you're like, this natural science passage is always so easy for me, I would like flip to passage 4 and answer those questions first. So I guess like the tip is to do passages in order of ease, which is kind of what I meant by that. Like if you're really good at science, go and do the science passage first, and then maybe you like history, so you flip to like the second passage because you're pretty good at history, and then like you're really bad at reading and interpreting stories, so do that one last. And something I'll probably say like a bunch of times is that every point is worth the same on the ACT, so don't waste time doing hard questions when you could be like gaining points on the easy questions. So if some of these passages are easier for you than others, then go and do those first. And then, like I said, I didn't use a strategy, so you don't have to use a strategy. But for me, I'd always just like go 1, 2, 3, 4 like in order. But if you find this method to help you like a lot, I would recommend doing it. And then the thing with this method is you can't decide on test day that you're gonna use it. You have to have been practicing it before, like with your practice tests and stuff like that. So if you are gonna use this method, like choose right now or choose like a month or 2 weeks before. Like I'm gonna do the 4th passage first, then the 3rd, then the 2nd, then the 1st. Don't say like on test day, oh, this passage looks easy, I'm gonna do it first and then go back and do the next one. Like no, don't do that. If you're gonna use this method, you should have planned it out beforehand, and you should know like which order you're gonna use. Sorry. Okay. Another thing to do before reading is so another thing to do before reading the passage is to kind of like take note of the passage context. And so we call it like preheating your brain, kind of like how you preheat an oven. So usually at the beginning of each passage, it'll say like the title or the excerpt, whatever they took this passage from. It'll kind of like describe maybe a little bit more about the passage and the context. So if you look at that, look at the title and the citation. Yeah, so if you just look at the title and it says like the Great Depression, something like that, I don't know. And you're like, oh, I remember learning about that in school, so you can kind of be like thinking your mind's in gear, you're thinking about the Great Depression. So when it comes to the passage, you'll already like be in the mode or whatever. You'll be ready to answer questions about like the Great Depression in the passage because you're already thinking about it, something like that. And so yeah, kind of what I was talking about, but kind of link your previous knowledge about the passage, or from like what you already know to the passage and the questions you're going to be answering. Sorry. Okay. There's like an exercise we could do with the books, but I know not all you have your books, and we don't need to do it. We'll do it next time. But yeah, so before reading, kind of just like make sure if you are going to do it in a different order, make sure you know that, and you should know that beforehand. And then when you start, like if you look at the first passage, you're going to answer questions. Kind of look at the title, maybe like read the quick little thing they say about it, and kind of get your brain ready to answer questions on that passage. Okay. And then I'm going to move over here. But this is still something to do before you're reading. I'm just moving over here to write it. Number 3. Is to kind of like force yourself to be interested in the passage. So it could be about like, I don't know, like World War II, and you're like, I hate talking about the military. I don't know. But it's only for 8 minutes. Like it's 8 minutes of your life. It's not a big deal. And if you can like pay attention on that passage for 8 minutes, maybe get a good score. Like who cares what it was about? Because you don't have to take the ACT ever again, like something like that. And then another thing, again, like to make sure you focus. But don't get distracted. I know like you guys said you've taken it before. I know when I took it one year, it was like really hot in the room, and I was like paying attention to other people, not like cheating, but like I was like listening to them like scratch and stuff. I don't know, their pencils and stuff. So like, and then I was like, wait, I need to be taking my test right now, and so I was just like focusing on like how hot it was in the room and everything like that, and I was not focusing on my actual ACT test, which is what I should have been doing. So like try to not get distracted, because again, it's like 8 minutes of your time, at least that one specific passage is. And it's going to be like important in the long run, so if you can just like focus now, it'll be better later. Okay, so this is all the stuff to do before you're reading. And then I'm going to erase this. So while you're reading the first passage, or like whatever passage you are on, again, this does not have to be for everyone, but if you do like this strategy, you can use it. So like taking notes and underlining. So this is something I always did. I would like underline some things I thought were important, or I'd like put a star next to maybe like some specific details. And so I don't have anything else, but yeah. So I would like underline some details I thought like could be important, or like put a star or like circle it. And it wasn't always like important, but sometimes I'd come to a question and it would ask like about something that I underlined, and I'd be like, oh yay, because I remembered it because I underlined it. So I just go back and look really quick, I'd find the answer and then move on. So it was just like quick like that. So not all the time the things that you think are important are like what they ask you about. But like oftentimes some things you do think are important are actually like what the questions are, and so it'll just be quicker, like you already knew the details because you had been focusing on it and things like that. Okay, that's the only tip I had for like while you're reading, just like underline, take notes, everything like that. And like I know some people like to write in the margins or anything like that, just like notes that they think are important. So those can definitely help. And then next is after reading. And so by that I mean when you're getting started to answer the questions. So again, this is another strategy that I'm sorry, I know I keep telling you don't have to use these and you don't. But if you do want to and these help you, then definitely go for it. Definitely think you should at least try these out and see if they work for you, and then which ones don't. So while you're looking at the questions, My first tip or strategy is to like formulate your answer and then look. And by that I mean is to first like read the question, and then before looking at the answer options, like think like what do you think the answer is. And so that when you do look at the answer options, you have like a pretty good idea of what you're looking for. And so like if you find an option that's like similar to what like your thoughts were, then you can choose it and like move on your way, because that's kind of like what you're already thinking. Number 6 tip, you guys already know, but process of elimination. So there's going to be 4 options. You can usually at least rule out 1 or 2. Maybe there's like 2 that you're stuck between. And so there's obviously only one correct answer. And then one big tip is if you find an answer option that's like slightly off, it's completely wrong. If not every single part of the answer is correct, then that answer option is not going to be correct. So even slightly off is all wrong. So tip number 7. Number 7 is to answer what the question is asking. So there could be like an answer choice. I guess let me write this down. So there could be some answer choices that are like factually correct, but it doesn't answer the question. So maybe they're like, I don't know, what's the color of the sky? And then one of the answer choices like grass is green. Well, like grass is green, but they're asking about the sky. That was like a bad example. They definitely want to ask that. But if that's kind of something like that, it's not going to be correct. Even if grass is green, that's not what they're asking about. So make sure you're answering what the question is about. And this goes for not just reading, but like every single ACT test. And then I did mention this earlier, but make sure that the passage supports your answer. There should be some type of evidence or some way to support the correct answer. If there's like no evidence, nothing at all, it's usually not going to be correct, because you shouldn't, because this is not like a content-based or like a knowledge-based test. Every single answer should be supported somewhere in the passage or anything like that. So I guess they say for this, I guess in my notes, apparently it's explicitly stated somewhere, I don't know, in like the directions or something, but they do say somewhere that you don't need any prior knowledge for the ACT. I mean, you should know stuff, like you should know like grammar rules and like for the and these types of strategies and stuff, but you don't need to know like how to do chemistry or something like that. All the answers should be supported by the passage. You should be able to find it. It's going to be difficult sometimes, but it's possible to find it, I guess, in the passage. And then last thing, okay. I was going to write it up here. But this is the last strategy. It's a little confusing, so let me write it all up here first. So if you're more than 30 seconds into a question and you're not 30 seconds from the end, skip it and come back. So like what I mean by that is if you're answering a question and it's like difficult, you're just sitting there thinking about it and you're like, okay, I'm not going to know the answer in 30 seconds. Just skip that question and then come back to it, because like I said, you're not going to get more points for answering a hard question than you would for answering an easy one. They're all worth the same. And so sometimes like coming back to a question can like give you like a new perspective, and you'll be like, oh, this is actually easy, like I actually know the answer. And so it's like better for everyone if you skip it and come back. Okay. So now I'm just going to talk about like a couple of more tips. Does everyone have this down so I can erase it all? Yeah. Okay. So let me just erase the whole board. I'll erase that last. Okay. So there are some things called split passages. And so they show up on the ACT reading, and then they also show up on the science, I think, just once. They don't always show up like on the reading. But basically what it is, I guess I'll draw a picture. It'll be like blah blah blah, passage A, and then it'll be like blah blah blah. This is passage B, and so basically there are like two different authors or like two different passages kind of like put into one. And so you'll have to answer questions about passage A, you'll have to answer questions about passage B, and then you have to answer questions about like both of them together and how they like relate and all that stuff. So the best tip for these ones is to read and answer. Let me erase this. The first passage. So just read passage 1, and then don't even read the second passage. Go straight to the questions and answer the questions for passage 1. And then next you're going to read and answer the second passage. And then once you do that, you're going to answer the joint questions. And so I don't think they do, I'm not completely sure. I don't think they do this on reading, but maybe on science, they'll kind of like mix up the questions. So the first question will be like about the second passage, and then the second question will be about both passages together, and then the third question will be maybe about the first passage. So if it is kind of like a setup like that where they jumble up the questions, before I even start reading, what I do is I would like go to the questions and like label it like 1, 2, 1 and 2, or like 1, 2, 1, everything like that. Or if it was like labeled A and B, I'd do like A, B, and B, B, A, something like that. Just so I know without like having to read the question, which passage they want me to answer from or like look back on. So I would usually do that before I even read the passages. Then I'd read and like answer the questions, kind of like this. Read the first passage, answer the first passage questions and everything like that. But if you're going to use that strategy, do that before reading. So those are the split passages. And then next we're going to talk about ways that they try and like trick you. I don't know, you guys probably know this if you've taken it before. If you haven't, the ACT does try and trick you a lot. Like, it's not an impossible test, but they do try and make it harder for you. So you always have to be watching out. Like, maybe it's always kind of fun when you like catch them trying to trick you. You're like, oh wait, like they're trying to trick me here, and like I got past it. That's always cool. But yeah, so we're going to talk about some ways they try to trap you on the ACT reading section. So one way they try and do it is called distortion. And so let me kind of write out the definition first. So the first way they'll try and trick you is using distortion. And so with that one, they'll kind of like twist details from the passage so that they're no longer correct. I don't know if I touched on this earlier. But let me think of an example. So maybe in the passage, it'll say like, this girl was born on April 20th, 1983 or something like that. And so then one of the answer options will say, the girl was born on April 20th, 1984. Well, she was born on April 20th, but it was 1983. So because they twisted the year, it's going to be incorrect. And so even though like part of it's correct, April 20th, because they switched the year, that's going to be like incorrect. The whole entire answer should be correct in order for you to like choose it. And then another way, kind of similar, is called the misuse detail. So with that one, it's usually like a detail that was in the passage somewhere, but it doesn't answer the question. So it could be correct, but it's not answering the question. So kind of like how I said, make sure to answer like what they're asking. So if they say, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but if they say something that was in the passage and you remember reading it, it might like cause you to think, oh, like that's the correct answer. I've seen it before. But it's not what the question is asking about. And so that's that misuse detail type of question. It was in the passage, but it's not necessarily correct because they didn't ask that question. Okay, so the next type of way they'll try and trap you or trick you, they're called like out of scope answers. And so it's going to be information that's not covered in the passage. Could be correct, could be incorrect, but it wasn't even in the passage. And like remember what I said, there should be evidence or support from the passage for you to choose like that, the best answer. So they could say like, I don't know, they could say like, America got their independence from Great Britain or something like that. And sure, they did, but that's maybe the passage was about, I don't know, the Civil War or something. And it's not about the Revolutionary War. And so they'll ask about, and so even though like maybe it's correct, they were definitely not talking about that in the passage. So that's not going to be the correct answer. Okay, and then the last way is okay, the last way is kind of by using like extreme language. Sorry, so they'll say words like always, never, best, and worst. So whenever you see like words like that, that's kind of like meaning going to the extremes. It's like didn't happen one time, happened always, or like all the time. Or it wasn't, they'll say, sorry, maybe they'll say like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, I need a drink. okay, so maybe they'll say in the passage, like, the food was okay, and then in the answer option, they'll say, like, this is the worst food, like, the character had ever eaten. Well, no, maybe it wasn't their favorite, but they didn't say it was the worst, so it's not going to be, like, these extreme words, like, always, never, best, worst, anything like that. It might not be, like, taken to the extremes in the passage, but they'll take it to the extremes in the answer choice, and so that's not going to be correct. Okay. And then one last thing to talk about, and kind of like the biggest thing to remember on the ACT reading, at least. But yeah, if you didn't remember anything from what I said today, remember this, is to always choose the best answer choice based on support from the passage. Every single correct answer should be supported somewhere in the passage. So if you can find evidence that your answer is correct, then you're good to go. So those are like the main things to remember with the ACT reading. And so when you're taking practice tests and stuff, if you kind of like forgotten the strategies, you can always like look back on your notes, things to remember. I'm not sure if there's practice tests in the homework that Miller's going to send out for this week, but if there is, you know all these strategies to take like a reading test, and so you can look back on your notes and everything like that. We'll touch more on like some of these things when we do practice tests in class. But other than that, those are all the reading notes that I have for you guys. Do you guys have any questions? You have a question?
The passage types, are they in a specific order, or is that randomized?
Yeah, so the order that I gave you, that's always the order. So if you do decide, like I said, if you like science better, if you decide you want to start with science, always flip to like the fourth passage and start with that one first.
The split passage, is that a type of passage? Or?
Oh, so that's not like a type of passage. It may be like a form of the passage. So it could be like the prose fiction. They'll like kind of split it into two passages, and so it'll be like one short narration and then another short one. And so with that one, use the methods that I gave you, like to answer the first passage questions first and then the second passage questions next. So it's not necessarily like a type, but it's kind of like they could split that passage. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, I'm not sure if the parents are still going. I'll open the door. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today, and I will be here on Thursday for your next class. So that's going to be the first, like, 2-hour one. So hopefully we'll get, like, some practice tests in. But, yeah, if you guys want to, like, pack up and stuff, I think you're good to go. At least that's all I have for you guys. But thank you so much for coming.